Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
I hate to be a contrarian right off the bat, but do not mail your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com because that's not my email anymore. Okay? How about you send them to Lynn Cullen Show at gmail.com. That's the place. Lynn Cullen Show at gmail.com. Okay, thank you very much. Happy Monday. Beautiful day. Told we'll have a beautiful week. I intend to revel in it. Although I must say, I guess heads up, if there's extraneous noise in the background, I've mentioned this before, but I have some heavy-duty construction going on directly in front of where I sit and right to the left of where I sit. And I'm looking at like dust being kicked up into this beautiful sky. And the sun is illuminating it. So everywhere I look, it looks like I'm in a dust storm. I want to say. Ay. Okay, so here I am. I don't know where else to be. It's October 11th. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I believe, however, the federal holiday is Columbus Day still today. That is the official federal holiday, which is why some things ain't open, including, I think, a lot of governmental entities. But the governmental entity known as the President of the United States has proclaimed today Indigenous Peoples Day, the first time an American president has done so. That doesn't make it a federal holiday. That would still have to happen through the Congress. And that will, of course, bump into lots of politicking from various camps, most obviously Native Americans versus Italians. Everything these days is a fight. You know, though, the red state of Alaska long ago, I think, adopted this day as that state's holiday. They don't have Columbus Day there, or don't acknowledge it. They have Indigenous Peoples Day. I think that a very red state, but with a sizable indigenous population. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. People are saying you can't hear all this commotion. Well, that's good. Great. Yeah, Josh, I just got that. And you sent that to where? I hope to, yeah, right. Okay. And Bree says, I can't hear anything in the background. Would that I could say the same. But this is going to be going on all week, no doubt. Whatever. I'm glad. That's good. You know, the entire time I worked at the radio station WPTT, and then when I was doing this podcast from studios on Smithfield with Steel City Media, I was in a studio, actual supposedly soundproof studio. Believe me, neither of those studios was soundproof at all. So I guess unless you're making a record Do people still say making a record, even though it might not come out as a record? I don't think it's necessary, so that's good. I'm glad. Anyway, I'm meandering, but it's Monday. Monday meanderings have been institutionalized here. I want to read you this advertisement. It's not really an advertisement, but it paid the ad rate, a full page ad rate in today's New York Times, which has to be hefty, right? To take out an entire page of the New York Times. It's a very, it gets your attention. The back page A22 of the front section of today's New York Times. And it has a red boundary. It has in the bottom half the map of the United States in yellow on that red. And then over that map in big black letters, it says, "This is Indian country." And I thought, ooh. I'm still a little confused, and I have to admit I haven't gone to the site that's at the bottom, because I thought Indian was not the term. Indian was a colonialist term, which is why we say Indigenous Peoples or Native Americans. So I thought, well, this can't be from Native Americans. But then I read the thing that's at the top, and it clearly is. And there was a question, a big question that it prompted. So I've already told you, okay, last page, New York Times, it's a picture of the United States of America, but it's overlaid by "This is Indian country" in very large letters. Okay. Which is why I said, started the show by saying Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Here is what is written, though, above the map that says this is Indian country. We the people. We are the people. We are not, quote, merciless Indian savages, end quote, as the Declaration of Independence calls us. That stopped me in my tracks. I said, the Declaration of Independence? I said this to myself. Has the phrase merciless Indian savages in it? This is news to me. And I'll get back to that in a second, okay? But let me read the rest of this. We are not merciless Indian savages, as the Declaration of Independence calls us, or bygone relics of the past, as countless history books paint us. We are not the sum total of long hair, braids, cheekbones, and feathers. We are not Halloween costumes, DNA tests, or fumbling sports teams. We are not the backs you break, the slurs you use, the stereotypes you uphold. We are older than your borders. Our roots are the ground you walk on. Our cultures, the foundation you've built on. We are the originals. This is our history. This is American history. This is truth. And then under that is the depiction of the United States with "This is Indian country." Now, I find this fascinating. I find this fascinating for a lot of reasons. And feel free to go to this, which I didn't have the time to do. This is IndianCountry.com to see who's behind this. But I was still so blown away by the contention in this age, that the Declaration of Independence calls Native Americans merciless Indian savages. So I did what anyone who's curious would do. I looked at the Declaration of Independence. When's the last time you looked at the Declaration of Independence? Whoa! It's something. It is something. And it's pretty long. And every man who signed it was, one would have to assume, extraordinarily brave, because they were announcing their secession from the British monarchy and knowing that there would be war. So let me just, before I get to the part I was looking for, because it wasn't right up at the top, but this is pretty good stuff. And given where we are now in our country's history, I think it bears remembering the origins. So this was put out on July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And then we get to the part that a lot of us recognize more readily. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And then they say they're not going to do this lightly. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They're saying people don't like to change. And in fact, they're even willing to suffer if that is what they know. Mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But they go on, when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And then it's fascinating because they go in to say, and here is our case. The history of the King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then it becomes a list of grievances against the King of England. Now, notice I was looking at this for the first time in a million years because of this full-page ad in the New York Times that said the Declaration has these words, merciless Indian savages, in it, which struck me as horrifying. And I'll tell you, the list of grievances is long. I'm looking. It just, it goes on and on. You think it was just taxation without representation? Good God. It just keeps going. I don't even know if you want to hear any of these. Here's one that, again, I did not know. He, every time they say he, that's the king, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, meaning he's kept the U.S. from growing, this colony from growing. And they say he's done it for the purpose of, by obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage migration thither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land, that he was stifling this young country, and they thought of themselves now as a country, from growing through immigration. And, obviously, the acquisition of land, which might, in fact, bring us to Indian savages because they had possession. Listen to this and see if anything rings true here to the tyranny we're worrying about now in these present times. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures, to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. On and on it goes. Way down here, I get taxes, imposing taxes without our consent, depriving us of the benefits of trial by jury, transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us. Okay. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, destroyed our lives. I'm still not seeing savage Indians. And I'm thinking, surely you can't take out a page like this and not have done homework. And here we go. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country. This is true. So if an American got grabbed overseas for any reason, I mean, on the seas, they would be conscripted into the British Army and forced to, as our Declaration of Independence says, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. And the next paragraph, he has excited domestic insurrections among us. That sounds current. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So there it is, right toward the end. They're blaming King George for what? For he's blaming King George for Indians protecting their land? I don't know. But I find it odd that this extraordinary document, which you should go read in full, you know, so much of which we sort of know by heart, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Well, excuse me, founding fathers, if all men are created equal, then how do the people who greeted Europeans as they came to these shores, how are they reduced to being merciless savages? Are they not equal? Well, of course they're not. Nor are women. When they said men, they meant men. What they didn't even bother saying is white. But these were different times. It's a pretty extraordinary document, but I had no idea that merciless Indian savages was part of it. Did you? I don't recall ever reading this in its entirety. You know those little phrases, but you don't know the meat of it. And then they declare war at the end. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world. God is ever present. For the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our and our sacred. I mean, that is the kind of stuff that, used to just, and still does. It's easier to be moved and proud when you refuse to acknowledge the complexity of these people and the disparity between what they say and how they, in fact, act. But make no mistake, I'm looking at the signers here. These white guys who signed that document had to assume they were signing their own death warrant. I would think. It's odd because, some states, Massachusetts just has one person who signed that. And Pennsylvania has, 10 more? 12? How's that? The only person who signed for Massachusetts was John Hancock, but he made up for it, we all know, by taking up a lot of space with his one little name. And some of the guys who signed for Pennsylvania, I have to say, I don't know who they are. Some you do and some you don't. My guy, Ben Franklin, is there, of course, and he's the most famous name. And the others, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know. We know Robert Morris, probably because of the university here. Benjamin Rush, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross. Any of those names familiar? Now, a lot of them aren't to me. Just saying. Oh, wait, I found more for Massachusetts. Sorry, they were in another. That didn't make any sense to me. Massachusetts, John Hancock, John Adams, Samuel Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Jerry, not sure. So anyway, that's it. And I ended up, taking you along on this sort of deep dive into the other thing I'm a little confused about is I got this from the National Archives, and it says it is a transcription of the document that is on display in the rotunda of the National Archives Museum, and with the spelling and punctuation exactly as it was. But I'm confused because when I was reading it to you, I changed something because I thought, didn't you think we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain, I thought it was inalienable rights. I have to tell you, that's what I said. That's not what it says here. It says unalienable. So what do I know? They're unalienable, not inalienable. But whatever they were never intended for everybody. no matter what this sounds like. Just saying. So happy Indigenous Day. By the way, also, because again, I'm learning so much history these days. A lot of people, as I said, the official holiday today, despite the president's proclamation, is Columbus Day. And the history of Columbus Day is fascinating. And like so many things in our history that we don't know, we never learned, Columbus Day was born of violence. I'm not talking about the violence of Columbus and his crew to the natives they encountered. I'm talking about a savage, at that word again, incident perpetrated not by Indigenous people, but by good Americans in New Orleans, where they, get this, lynched the good men of New Orleans, broke in to the parish prison and lynched, hung, shot, killed 11 men. The year 1891. The 11 men were not black men. You hear lynch and you think mobs, lynch, black. No. The 11 men were Italian immigrants. Italian immigrants. So this was the backdrop of how Columbus Day came to be. It was an effort to ameliorate the rage in the Italian American community. For political purposes. A jury in New Orleans had acquitted these men. They had been charged with murdering a police chief. And people weren't having any of it. And they broke into the prison and took these guys and other Italians that were in the jail that had nothing to do with the case in question and killed them. And what's amazing is that the newspapers at the time were on the mob's side. When we talk about this American problem with immigration, here you have in the Declaration of Independence, one of the complaints being that the Crown would not let a lot of immigrants come in to the colonies, which the colonists wanted to grow the country. But once people get here and once they move in and get acclimated, there is often this turning around and wanting to prevent others from getting in. So when Italians started coming in, they were treated no differently than the poor Haitians, the Mexicans, brown and black-skinned people. And so they suffered the same kinds of rough justice. And the article in the local New Orleans paper about this massacre, extra-constitutional, totally illegal, murderous massacre, the headline read, "Avenged." The Associated Press described the lynch mob thusly: "It was not an unruly mob." Then what's the definition of mob? "It was not an unruly mob," said the Associated Press in 1891. "It was simply a sullen, determined body of citizens who took into their own hands what justice had ignominiously failed to do." And the paper of record, the New York Times, wrote this: "While every good citizen would agree that this affair is to be deplored, it would be difficult to find any individual who would confess that privately he deplores it very much." Wink, nod. The New York, a deplorable. And a guy who was the U.S. Civil Service Commissioner of the time, a guy whose name you might know, Theodore Roosevelt, he said of this massacre of these Italians, "Personally, I think it is a rather good thing." So out of this, there were consequences. Italy, the country of Italy, broke off diplomatic relations with the United States. They recalled their ambassador. There was even some talk of war because the Americans then removed their ambassador from Rome. And then finally, the Americans agreed to compensate the families of the lynched men with some money. And it was sizable, actually. It was a total of $25,000, which is equal to about $760,000 today. I don't know. I mean, it's not. Italy accepted. That didn't go over well with the American citizenry, who said that Uncle Sam was humbling itself before Italy. Anyway, there was an election looming. The president at the time was Harrison, William Henry Harrison. And he had an election coming up against Grover Cleveland, who he had defeated to become president. And now Cleveland was trying to regain his presidency. Yeah, I think there's someone in the country now who's got similar ideas. And so Harrison was really into mending political fences in every direction. He didn't want to have the Italian vote go against him. So diplomatic relations with Italy resumed, blah, blah, blah. Italy was still insanely furious, and who can blame him? Because not one lyncher, not one killer of those innocent men was ever prosecuted. But it turned out 1892, that was the election year. And guess what else that was? Oh, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? 1492. It was the 400th anniversary of Columbus I'm doing air quotes, discovering America. And so that's how it happened. They decided to create Columbus Day. And the first Columbus Day parade in New York City, the New York Times called it the greatest crowd New York ever held. 40,000 marching military men. And bringing up the rear of the parade, 1,000 Native Americans wearing Indian costumes with red blankets, painted faces, and feathered headgear. And then the next day, they unveiled the statue of Christopher Columbus, which still stands at Columbus Circle in Manhattan. Anyway, so that's how it all happened. History. Wow. By the way, Harrison got defeated anyway. Grover Cleveland made a comeback. And what was that? It wasn't until 1971 that Columbus Day, of course, actually was made a federal holiday. But there you go. There's the history, all about political calculation. And as with so many things in this country's history, is soaked in blood. I saw a letter to the editor of the Times by a guy named Jay Markowitz, and I just want to say he took the words out of my mouth. It's certainly my thoughts. He was talking about and responding to the anti-immigration sentiment in this country. And he wrote this, and I've said this a million times. He says it very elegantly and concisely. The arduous, perilous journey some migrants make to reach the United States is beyond the experience and even the imagination of most Americans. Right there. I mean, and that's a sentence written by somebody who's capable of empathy, of imagining, not just reacting to the people that have come to the end of that journey, but imagining what they have endured on their way. And he's saying us Americans, we the people who have it so good that people keep in desperation streaming toward this country, we can't begin to imagine what they go through. And he says these intrepid people risking life for a better one would bring more to our country than our country would give to them. Yep. And there's the calculation that so many people get wrong. They look at these people that would endure that arduous, perilous, unimaginable journey, and they see a threat. When instead they come bearing the gift of their tenacity the gift of their resilience and hope. And we burn them, defame them, hound them, corral them, abuse them, deport them. This guy, his last sentence says it. We may not deserve them. Nevertheless, we should let them in. It's the opposite of that cry from Exodus, let my people go. Let them come. And I have said that, everybody running out and getting dogs and then everybody likes these, manufactured dogs, these doodle-oodles and purebreds. Yeah, sweet. Not all dogs are wondrous. I've always believed that mutts, mixes, hybrids are the best. And I'm not talking about hybrids like the doodles. I'm talking about nature's own hybrids. I'm talking about a dog seeing another dog and saying, hey, that's what I'm talking about, just naturally occurring mutts. I think I think vets will tell you, they're healthier than the pure breeds. They're healthier. They're often smarter. I mean, they're just better. Why? Because they're not just one thing. They're this amalgam. There is this wondrous mixture. Sometimes it comes out looking a little odd, but they're stronger. And I have always believed that if the United States had ever a claim to being exceptional, it was because that we, unlike most nations, well, that's not true in this hemisphere, unlike European nations, was a product of immigration, immigrants from all over coming to this one place, intermarrying, and creating a nation of mutts. It was also because those that came, in their desperation, usually, were the most courageous of their people, the most willing to take extraordinary risks, heading into the unknown, leaving everything they knew behind, their language, their families, everything that tethered them to this earth, and went off into a void, chasing a dream. People who don't have that kind of courage, sense of adventure, stayed put. And America was on the receiving end of so many people like that. And to think that the people who now, those Haitians, all of those people in the caravan, that these people are not the same people that created the exceptional aspect of this country. They're the same. And now, in our arrogance and stupidity, we turn them away. There was always the crowd that wanted to turn them away. Italians? First of all, they were not considered white. No. It took a while, and then they got considered white. For God's sakes, the Irish weren't even considered white. So color of skin is really not what it's about. You don't get to be a white guy until, I don't know, enough of the prejudice, enough of the absolutely ignorant hate is erased. So I'm just saying. Speaking of hate, Great Britain is up in arms about rapes and killings of women there, some high-profile ones, and the sense that the police don't really care. In fact, one of the big murders was actually a cop who killed a woman. And there's so much anger there now, and they're dealing with this. And there was a piece that I read today that some people in Great Britain want misogyny to be listed as a hate crime. Now, misogyny is a word that's about hate. So, it's not, it is the hatred of women. And they have laws not unlike our own, where if you can prove that hate is a motivator of the crime, then the punishment tends to be more severe. More severe than, for instance, an act of just crazed passion. And the reality is that misogyny is the underpinning for probably most violence against women. And so British law has 5 categories where hate can come into play. And those categories are race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or transgender identity. Well, misogyny is certainly, understandably, conceivably part of that litany of groups that need extra protection. Women. All you have to do is think, well, here, with our mass murders every few seconds, the one in Atlanta, where that young man, broke into how many? I mean, more than one massage parlor business and mowed down all those women. And it was because he was afraid of them. He hated them. He didn't know what to do with them, and so they should die. It's misogyny. And I don't know that that's any different than somebody, attacking a black person because they're scared of and hate Black people. I don't know. I don't know. I want to tell you that, and Ella, if you're listening, I just worry that you never heard my thank you for that huge gift of books you sent me. This is my last time making sure you know that I got them, and I was very moved. And there's no way I'm going to read all those books. Some, but I want to make sure I've some friends have taken some. They say, "Oh, I'd like to," and I have a pile that I'm looking at right now that I do intend to read. I've already read 2, but I thought, what can I do with all these books? And there's this wonderful little neighborhood book drops around. Those little boxes that people build and stick in their front yards, where you take a book and leave a book. And there are a number of them that, in my neighborhood. And so I took some of the books yesterday. What I did is I actually went to a neighborhood that I thought would be a great neighborhood. I'm not going to name names. And I took my dog, and we walked and walked and walked. And what I was doing was casing the joint, looking for these book receptacles. And I found 5, and 2 of them were full. So there were 3 that could use some books. Later, I went with my car and took some books, and I had such pleasure deciding which books would go in which boxes, and knowing that people walking by, because I often stop and look, and quite clearly by seeing these things full, and then maybe 3 weeks later you see them denuded books. So Ella, I hope you're out there, because your books are all over now, including my house. And I'm sure will give a great deal of pleasure to people, because you chose them so well. And it's just a little everything: biography and fiction and nonfiction and funny and serious and just wonderful, wonderful. So just wanted you to know, and it was the best part of my day yesterday. I felt like I was doing something good, and it was fun for me. And we were in, like, I think 4 different recognizable neighborhoods of Pittsburgh, the dog and I, and had a great walk, explored some wonderful neighborhoods, and put those books around. And the other thing I want to say is some of those Halloween decorations that some of you guys are putting up absolutely terrorize my dog. I mean, I'm sure I've told you this before, but he's minding his own business, walking down the sidewalk in a neighborhood he knows, and all of a sudden there's this like hand coming out of the ground. And I have to tell you, when he jumped, it was, I'm not kidding, he jumped. Because even a dog knows, that's not right. Hands don't come out of the ground. And so, yeah, these skeletons and the big, huge inflatable things that are moving. God knows. I mean, a dog has to navigate our environment, and our environment can get pretty weird. And there's no way There's no way of sort of explaining it to him. But I've noticed that since he saw that hand, he has seen more than that hand. He's seen a lot more, and he's starting, I can tell, to become inured. Oh, there's another hand coming out of the ground. I can see, but quite clearly, his first reaction was, "What the?" I mean, clearly and understandably. Okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm sorry if you did not appreciate the history lesson, but I find current events so appalling and frightening that I'm much rather talk about things that are gone and that help bring us where we are. I hope you can enjoy this glorious autumnal day, and I'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.